Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to the Alchemist and Oracle, a space where we engage in spiritualized conversations that deepen understanding, inspire transformation, and speak meaningful dialogue about life's most profound truths. I am Nicole Love, the Oracle, also known as Nick, and as always, I'm joined with my amazing co-host, Warrioress, Ardeshir, the Alchemist. Today, we're diving into a topic that we've all wrestled with at some point, and it's the agreement, don't make assumptions. So let's be honest. Have you ever found yourself, those listening, ask yourself, have you ever found yourself filling in the blanks about someone's intentions only to realize you got it completely wrong? So assumptions, they can be really sneaky and they feel like truth in the moment, but more often than not, they lead us down paths of misunderstanding and, unnecessary conflict. I think conflict is always helpful. So why do we make assumptions? How do they shape our relationships, disrupt our peace of mind, or even ripple through society at large? We're going to kind of dive into that. So in today's conversation, we're unpacking it all, why assumptions happen, the impact they have, and most importantly, how we can shift away from making them. Because when we let go of assumptions, we open the door to clarity, deeper connection, and a more compassionate understanding of the people around us. Let's explore this together. Warriors, are you ready to dive in there?
I'm ready. This is a this is a whole time subject.
All right, so I want to talk about. So first of all, we have to shout out the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Do you have the book that you can show to our lovely?
Oh, of course.
So she's going to show the book, and so. If you're watching, if this is your first introduction, you're doing really good there, Dana Black. If this is your first video that you've ever seen of ours, we actually have done some other videos to break down the other two agreements. And we also are going to have all four agreements when it's all said and done as well. So be sure to, I'll probably create a playlist so you can kind of click through them and find them really quickly. So be sure to check that out on our channel. So I'm going to jump in really quickly and then I'll bring you into the conversation because I know you have a lot to say about don't make assumptions. So how Ruiz presented it in the book is that he emphasizes that assumptions are born from fear and the human tendency to fill in gaps of understanding. And he also speaks about how assumptions create internal stories that may not reflect reality, thus leading to unnecessary conflict or suffering. So what's your perspective on how Ruiz presented it in the book in a way that you want to point out?
Well, since I have a lot of tabs and highlight, I'm gonna go to the book and then I can definitely lead into the reflection. Because based off what you said, like just right on the beginning page, he talks about we make assumptions about what others are doing or thinking, and then we take them personally on some things. Then we blame them by reacting and by sending emotional poison, which is huge, the hell that we live in. So the big one I had on page 64 is that when we are making this assumption, we're asking for problems. But the biggest thing is all sadness and drama you have lived in your life have been rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally, which is the other agreement. And so when we look at that, taking a moment to consider the truth of some of these things is really huge. And it has a lot to do with the fact that we make assumptions without asking questions, but also the ego plays a part in that as well. When we do that, I'm going to give y'all an example of everything that everybody does is texting, which has its purpose, but I really consider it a real impersonal one, depending on what you want to talk about. And so if you send somebody a message and because we want everything right back or coming to us, we can kind of make an assumption, or we start making assumptions about why that person hasn't texted me back like right away. Like they just sitting there waiting for us to to see our message at the time we sent it when we have some thought on our mind or something like that. And personally, that has happened. It's like, oh, da da da, or is it something that I've written that has been offensive, this and that, and it just comes back that they were busy doing something else and they finally got back to you while we sitting there making assumptions of why they haven't gotten back to us, which causes a little bit of suffering within and a whole bunch of anxiety, which is the hell that we seem to want to live ourselves in. Does that help bring a little bit of perspective here on something that we are doing? And I've seen it happen in discussions and through ongoing texts. Where I'm like, oh, you didn't get a hold of me yet. Well, no, baby, I was busy and I didn't even have my phone, so it didn't have nothing to do with you. So you took that non-response personally. So you can't make assumptions. And the ego will take you there in a heartbeat. And that's all the suffering we got going on, this poison that we spew off on each other. So that's one take I have on why we shouldn't make assumptions. In the way, and he makes several examples in the book, so that's just one of mine.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's a really good applicable one. I want to also start defining words, because I think sometimes we think we understand the meaning of words, and I'm realizing that dictionaries is just not a thing that people even know exist. But
can I go get one? Can I go get one? Because some people don't know what they are.
Judging you. Sorry, not sorry. I'm a work in progress.
I can go get a dictionary.
So I looked up the word assumptions, and according to dictionary.com, it's a noun, assumption, and the plural noun is assumptions. So it's defined as a thing that is accepted as true or as certain to happen without proof. And so they give an example in the sentence, they make certain assumptions about the market. Another definition of assumption that they provide is the action of taking on power or responsibility, the assumption of an active role in regional settlement. So it's like taking on, like you assume, like I'm going to assume the responsibility of coordinating who's going to be responsible for bringing what dish for Valentine's Day. So those are how you can use those words in a sentence. So ask yourself, do you know what assumptions are? And also ask yourself, how are you making assumptions? How have you made those assumptions? Kind of leaning back into your example about someone you send someone a text message and they're like assuming that you're ignoring them. And it's like, no, I actually have my phone turned off because maybe I'm engaged. For me, like I take it from my perspective, like, no, I haven't responded. Maybe my phone is on silent because I've just got into a session with a client and I'm like kind of like like attaching from energy and all that. Or maybe I just don't want to talk to anybody and I'm not responding to my text messages. I'm not looking at them. Or like you said, I left my phone at home. And maybe I have the intention of following up with you like later that evening. Because sometimes if I'm busy during the day, I don't respond to my text messages and I just sit down at the end of the day and kind of look back over them. But you over there on the other end have like created this whole story of like, oh, she's ignoring me, and even to the point where I've heard people say like, what did I do to piss you off? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, because I didn't respond to your text message within a minute. I also think we need to adjust.
I felt that way. Yeah.
The texting thing, I feel like that's a whole nother conversation. I think we need to adjust expectations around people responding. Like, and I find myself having to have these conversations with people where they're like, oh, well, I sent you a text message and you didn't respond. And it's like,
yep.
Really
I'm like, I ain't see it.
Respond to like, or maybe you did see it and you're like doing something, or like, like
or driving.
One thing, that part, driving. Maybe
I
I'm
drive a
having
lot.
dinner with a friend and I'm trying to be present with that friend and I see,
Yep.
oh, so-and-so texted me. Great. But I'm still engaged in that conversation. So I also feel like we need to adjust expectations around our access to other people as well. And I think that can kind of help with the assumptions that we make as well. Does that make sense what I said?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, half of the assumptions come, and even if it's that deep that you need, then, you know, we got away from, like I said, the person out, then make a phone call. And if I don't answer then you know that I'm not available, and hopefully you'll have another means to get whatever it is answered, or however you're trying to get a hold of me, because whatever happened to the phone. I mean, and he actually gets into the book. What comes up about is the other thing, you know, not asking questions, which I think is the depth of some things. And we'll get to the relationship part, because I think that's even more, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a relationship, because I got some examples with me. And if don't nobody know me, it'll only be anybody that know me who will know I'm speaking. But in general, actually, because I think it happens in a lot of relationships, this assumption, I even made them. And when I also know when you don't seem to have your voice, you think people can read your mind.
You got a mind reader, girl?
Matter of fact, after learning some things from, you know, our spiritual mentor, I don't want to be in nobody's head. I actually, being in my head wouldn't be all bad, but I don't think I want to be in nobody else's head.
As I say, the mind is a dangerous place to be.
Yes.
All on, like, alone, and you really feel like you have to be like, you need your heart to connect you and guide you through, because it's a dangerous place. Well, to be in someone else's mind, oh hell no, I'm good.
Well, as you know, I think we might have explained Diva G closely, Coach Laura, but it's Diva G, who's our coach, who said that being in your mind without adult supervision is a terrible to kind of be. Yeah,
that adult supervision part,
without adult supervision.
She's right. She's very right about that. I agree. You know,
so it took me a minute to kind of figure out what
she was saying.
But yeah, that's an initial, because you know we've been around for a while, but yeah, I was like, ooh, wow, that's kind of heavy.
It is, right? Wait, you need to tell me my mind is like, I shouldn't be there by myself without adult supervision? But it's so true, and maybe we'll have a conversation. Probably have to do a series about like the mind and how the mind has a negativity bias. So if you need any studying on learning about the mind, and I feel like it should be a requirement as humans to understand how your mind works. Because when you really understand that your mind works in that way, you start to kind of pause and question things like, okay, wait, I know I might have thought I saw this, but it's really what I saw.
You become more aware. Well, it's about an awareness, and even, you know, I don't mind sharing. I mean, well, except for last year, I've been around major years or Young Men's and Spiritual Studies Sanctuary, and everything comes up in reference about our mind and the things of that nature, and how things just pop up. And like you said, that our minds automatically, we come here with a negative, with a mind bias, or a mind negativity bias. And so it's just one of those things that we have to run, because how these and how the guy Miguel Ruiz got these in is that they're all tied together. And like the next, you know, agreement ties back to this one as well as this one ties back to don't take anything personally. And from that, you know, I have to do it impeccable with your words. So that sequence, as you can see it go back there. And as we go in there, because everybody wants to understand relationships and wonder, and I mean, I guess 2020 was a perfect example when people had to be in the same room with each other on a regular basis, how they got to find out some things that I want to discuss here in reference to this particular agreement, on how we assumed many things about one another, didn't know even what we assume about what marriage is. And that's a big one that's in here, that I definitely want to speak on. But and people think that you can't speak on anything because of where you've been. But the only reason why some people who have gotten married are not married are tied to a lot of the agreements. Period.
Yeah.
Except for maybe abusive stuff, but that's a whole nother stuff which comes from the back because of the agreements. And then you have to do the work, and then a lot of us bring baggage into the agreements like this, making assumptions. So assumptions from where we've been, what we thought, and I have perfect examples of that when we get, to that part, because the relationship, whether it be friendship, whether it be intimate relationship, you can have intimate relationships without being. Okay, since we're here with dogs, because the first thing people's
Are
mind
we
want to go
adults?
to,
Are we
I hope
really
so.
adults? Because
I
we're talking
don't
about
know, not
adult
really.
supervision here.
Yeah, I know, right?
Who's the
Always
adult?
go to intimacy. The first thing they want to go to do is sexual. I'm like, God doggone it. There's a lot more to the essence and the being of each other. That intimate friends don't mean that you're kissing and having sex. It's just that you have this connection with one another, and you still have to understand that some of us have that ebb and flow, like they say, some twins, that you can just know what the other person's gonna say because you have this connection, or this thing of that nature. And then there's intimacy relationships where you are in that particular set, where that's where you are. So there's, it's just like being in a marriage and somebody wanted to take, well, I'm like, well, our relationship. And they took offense to that. Well, I'm like, aren't we in a relationship? Even a marriage is a relationship. But why you got to call it anything else? And we take it, instead of asking what you meant by that, you're going to take offense that just because we're married, we're married, but we're in a relationship. At least, and that's supposed to be ever growing, ever building. And because of that, he mentioned in here that there's no, I think it might be in the other agreement, so let me not get ahead of myself. Um, um, that it's never the same. If you're growing, if both people are growing, then you're growing and you get to know and you get to understand that. But if one is growing and one is not, then a lot of assumptions are made between one another, without asking. The whole thing is that we don't choose to ask the questions to do that. Hell, I might as well just go in one of the examples, I guess. Um, One of them had to do with, there was something um, that this person wanted to do like twice a year. Well, I didn't know nothing about that, for instance. So yes, I'm getting personal right now. So the thing of it is that, I can't assume what I don't know. And then technically, if this is something you do, if I can choose to try to remember, but if you got me wanting to remember 55 million things in a year, that's just not going to happen. So if you want something, you just let me know, and when that time comes.
Right now. Are you okay?
I'm good. I'm really good, actually. I'm just trying to give you some food to kind of look at your behaviors.
Yeah.
That sounds like behaviors. Your behaviors in certain situations, and the high expectations that you have from somebody, which are assumptions. You can't assume certain things. You just have to let somebody know and go from there. And then, you can ask the questions. I come to find out that birthdays for somebody ain't a big deal. So they don't remember somebody. Birthdays are huge for me. So I have to take, for those who really care, that's gonna, deal with that and know which friends aren't. So, and there's different levels of that. So I can't make assumptions that people know, but I speak about my birthday a lot. So that is a very important part. So there's no assuming about that. So, you know, so.
I think you hit the nail on the head about expectations, and I think we can see it play out very clearly in our relationships, whether it's like friendship or sexual. Because I still feel like there's a level of intimacy in how we relate, because there's this has to do with vulnerability in some capacity. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But expectations, they will influence our assumptions, because it's our expectations that we have. It connects back to that our perspective on how things should be or how they look. So we make assumptions, like you're saying, and I think a lot of people can relate to this within like those intimate relationships, whether you're with like a marriage or partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, the blurry area.
Okay, here it is. Okay, don't blur it. So here's the thing, girlfriend, boyfriend. Okay, so like, well, we address each other on a warrior level, but technically people say, oh, that's my girlfriend. Okay, so just because I have a girlfriend, just because I might be, really into, so,
the things you say without saying it, but go ahead. I know what you're saying. I don't know that people know you well enough to.
Well, I guess they'll get it soon.
Between the lines. But go ahead. You were saying.
Just say like, hey, I'll be like, hey, that's my girlfriend. And so people would like to tell you, I'm like, where did we devise girlfriend? And like, oh, that's so like with so I use the word best dude. I have a bestest dude. That would go by one ear. So if they say, hey, that's my boyfriend. So if I say that's my boyfriend, people gonna think we into a one of the kissy relationships, when that's not the case. So I have to define it. So I say, hey, that's my girlfriend over there. Now, if you want to, if it comes to me, if you want to know where I was in a relationship with somebody, I'll be like, hey, that's my woman. So that's a whole different thing that we had to try to make some separation so people don't
make that
friendship.
Assumption.
Yeah, don't make the assumption. So if that's my girlfriend, people would know that, then they would take that, is that, or in a heterosexual relationship, this and that's my boyfriend. So they gonna think that because we got this close relationship, and that's came up with one of my other dudes and said, well, not interested. Well, whether I was not or this or that don't mean that they would still be in a relationship, because they may not be my type to be in relationship with. You have to choose much better who to go in relationship with. So we make assumptions. So he's like, okay, they tight, they must be doing something. No. I don't have nothing to do with it. And that's assumption. If you want to know some ass, I may tell you, because it might not be none of your business. So the thing of it is you need to ask.
I feel like that needs to be like a side agreement. That ain't FYI, that ain't none of your business. That would like solve and resolve a lot of stuff. Because that's like something that I like heavily reminded myself of, like, it's not your business, Nick love. It's not your business. Like reminding myself that, because it really isn't my business how you are in relationship with someone else, and me making assumptions, whether you say that's my girlfriend. Like, why do I care from that space of trying to insert myself in figuring out, well, what does that mean? Why is that my business? That's not my relationship. So I think we get so caught up in feeling like we have every right to understand how people are in relationships. We need to really focus on ourselves. That's a whole, I feel like I need to write that down.
I too. I mean, well, we can, play back this.
Yeah, but it goes back to what we're really talking about. Like, don't make assumptions. Like, why is this an agreement? Why is this an agreement that I really feel like is probably one of the agreements that a lot of people in our society here in these United States of America we're greatly challenged with this one. I really think this assumptions one is great. That one, and don't take anything personal. I feel like they kind of bleed into each other. They hold each other's hands right now.
Yes, I was looking for a definition, because in this other part, one of the words that was defined, but y'all need to read the book.
Well, to read the book, because I have to,
like, on page 65, it's talking about the big what he says, without it, I think it's called matote, which is that hell in the mind. So it says the big matote in the human mind creates a lot of chaos, which is the hell in the mind, which causes the misinterpretation of everything and misunderstand everything. We only see what we want to see or hear what we want to hear, and we don't perceive things the way they are. So that's the kind of thing. And one of the examples, which is on basically at the bottom, is you're walking in the mall and you see a person you like. Oh, this is a good example right here. And I'm telling you, because of some experiences that I had, and I had another experience, if it's supposed to be shared here, will come back, and they give you, a little look or a smile, then all of a sudden we think that they want to, kind of get with you or something, or talk to you someone. It's just an acknowledgement of your presence, unless something else happens in the interim or after that to figure out whether or not they want to be with you or not. That's an assumption.
That's something that I struggle with. Seriously. People assume my friendliness is me flirting with them.
Yeah.
Or it's an invitation.
Natural flirting.
Well, you are flirty, girl. You really flirty. But anyway, she knows it. That's why she laughing. But people think it's like an invitation for them to proposition me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's why it's really important to pause and reflect on the assumptions that you make. Because sometimes when we make those assumptions, we can really offend people, or we can disarm them in such a way where it's like, wait, what? Absolutely not. I've had a visceral response in that way. I literally was like, I spoke to someone and in the store, and I have a layered example here of assumptions, right? So I walked into the store with my boyfriend, and there was this guy that was like, I thought he worked there, so I made an assumption. So I spoke to him. It's like, hey, how you doing, right? And I'm just super friendly person. Like, hey, how you doing? Right?
Me too.
And my boyfriend is always kind of like, he feels like his role is to be my bodyguard. So he doesn't say anything to the guy. The guy proceeds to come over and ask me for my number. And I'm like, no, I said, no, I'm in a relationship. I'm not interested. This started this interesting dialogue around the assumptions that all three of us had made in that moment. I made an assumption that he knew that this was my boyfriend because of our body language. Like, I was holding his hand, and I was kind of like leaned into him. My boyfriend also made the assumption, like, why you approach her when you see
me?
Yes. The other guy made an assumption. She spoke to me. So that was an opening.
Invitation, yeah.
So it just kind of shows
that's a problem.
How everyone has these assumptions. But here's the important part. How can you get to that place of clarity without being pissed off or reactive? So me being me is like, okay, I'm choosing to de-escalate the situation because it's not that serious. It really is not that serious.
Right.
So I was like, so that's why I said, no, I'm in a relationship. And this is what I said, no, I'm not interested. I'm in a relationship with him. Right. But of course, the guy just was like, oh, well, I don't really care about that.
That's what I said. He didn't care. I already knew that.
I don't care because, well, you're not married is what he said. And I was like, okay, I'm out. I can't, I just can't get any clearer than that.
Somebody think they're better than somebody else, which is an assumption.
But I think the point I'm trying to make is like how we all make assumptions in some capacity. And the distinction here and why I think it's so important is that, assumptions, when we have these assumptions, they create a level of illusion. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about in, I can't remember which agreement. It was the agreement where we were talking about how we all have, like, Don Miguel Ruiz, he talks about how we all have this storyline going on, playing out in our head, and people play the characters, right? So because we have these characters, we make this assumption of, which is an illusionary creation in our mind, because, like,
don't take it personally.
You're gonna be this character in my life in this way, because this is how I create this dreamscape, right? So the assumptions, they really do create like that illusion, which is like this cloud of, it kind of clouds the truth.
Yeah, well, it's not the truth. What we think is the truth when we make those assumptions, like smiling at that dude, and he thinking that was an invitation for him to come over and do that with another male present. Which in the old school days, you kind of, they kind of had a lot more intuitiveness. Just want to put it that way.
But but here's the thing. We live in a world now where that is out the window for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yes.
That's out the window, where it's like, well, I can see you with a man, but does that mean that you are exclusive with that man? A lot of people don't make that assumption anymore. So they approach you. And I guess in some ways it's like a way of getting that clarity of, like, okay, are you with this person, or like I'm shooting my shot?
You have an open relationship. Yeah.
Thank you. So there's a lot of that too. And sometimes you just don't know, because there's been times where people are trying to figure out, like when I'm with my brother, people are always trying to figure out, like, if we're a couple. For whatever reason. Me and my brother are like really, really close, and like we joke, and like I'm always hitting him, and like he's my brother. This is like, he abused me growing up, okay, in a very loving way. And so people, we kind of feel it, and it goes back to what I said about the stronger. Girl, I'm lucky to be alive, okay? Seriously. I really am lucky. My brother is lucky to be alive. I don't know how that man is alive. He does a lot of stuff, girl. Like falling through the ceiling, and like stuff on.
He was a curious one.
Using fire and like firecrackers, and using like his bike to like scale walls, and like in the wall. Like, he's lucky to be alive. And I'm lucky to be alive because I was the one like that was on like watch duty in case he didn't survive, or if I needed to go get help.
Oh my God, that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah, we went on a whole tangent there, but
that's all right. The people probably need a little laugh, or well, no. The point is
assumptions. There. People make assumptions about my relationship with my brother as well. They're trying to figure out.
Just because you're with the male, I mean, it's yes. And now to add to the layer, when I'm with my friend Miguel, who's a female, me and her, we have friends who are part of the queer community, and so we're in places where it's a shared space. And so now when I go into spaces with her in certain parts of the city and the surrounding area, people are trying to figure out, like, are they a couple? And so and then also too, some people have just made assumptions. Like one girl came up and was like complimenting my friend on like, "Ooh, your girlfriend she's nice," and she was just like offended in two ways. Like, first of all, I would have took that as a compliment.
Like, no, it was not.
It was not complimentary.
She delivered it was kind of like,
oh
yeah,
raunchy. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because she was like looking at me while she was saying that to her, like licking her lips and stuff. But anyway,
oh, I already knew. Yeah, okay.
So
guys do it too. It don't matter on either end. It can be a little.
I feel like this is my experience where I am. I feel like the women here are much more aggressive than men in my experience.
I heard that.
But I think it may be because of the spaces that I'm in. They assume, again, assumptions here. They assume if I'm in the space that I'm part of, I'm open to invitation. I am open, and like you can like ask me and I'll like give you that clarity and insight that you need, which is important.
Well, that's the whole thing, is to ask questions.
We got to get to the asking questions. So
that's what he talks about.
Let's dig into that part.
Well, let me see. I highlighted it.
Through the assumptions and such based on what you have highlighted.
Well, just to go back, and there was a question about marriage and how people look at going into marriage, and I think that you ought to have clarity.
Let's talk about that.
Clarity is having those questions. So it says it's better to ask questions than make assumptions, because assumptions set us up for suffering. And I had BAM! Exclamation point. It sets us up for suffering. And so that's the thing that we're trying to alleviate in the mind, is the suffering. And that's why we're having these conversations. As one example is talks about, you decide to get married and you make assumptions that your partner sees marriage the same way as you do. Then you live together and find out this is not true. And obviously that has happened within the last 4 years. This creates a lot of confliction, but you still don't try to clarify your feelings about marriage. And the husband comes home and the wife is mad, and you get all this, and it's like a mind reader can't read. It's like as if he can read her mind. He can't. I have a lot to, even with siblings and family members, that same situation happens. So instead of you assuming, you need to ask the question. And we have gotten to a place where we're not communicating. When I say impersonal, and depending on how you write a text, and that stuff can come off kind of offensive, and people don't get that. And so you can better articulate in person. On the phone, you can feel energy. You can feel when somebody is going on, just like at the game last night. I make a song, but I can pick up on somebody's energy. And before I left, the woman was laughing, because that's just what I do. So at least that's what I intend to raise the vibration a little bit when something is going on in a certain situation. And I asked a couple of questions. And so I got the answers that I needed from the person, and in reference to that, while I was buying something down at the field house for the basketball game. And so I have experienced these things. And if you don't know somebody and you assume, but once you know somebody, then, and it talks about how you think you know somebody, and you really don't. So you have to continue to ask questions throughout, related to things change, and things never stay the same. And I think that might lead into the agreement that we'll be talking about. But when I look at some of the experiences in being in relationships and have experienced certain things, and it caused so much anxiety, it caused so much stress, it actually can affect your body. So when you don't have clarity in a relationship or a friendship, like I had a certain situation happen over a year ago, well, this person went all this, and you assume some stuff that you think you know about me, and you don't. I can't deal. Instead of you asking, you made assumptions. Some certain thing happened, and it was an unfortunate circumstance. And I realized that for one, it's like, I couldn't take that personally. You're trying to stand out and be something else, and made assumptions about what I wouldn't do and this and that, instead of just asking, and things would have went differently because of how the situation went down, without getting into the specifics. Having to do, I assume, but I'm pretty sure it had to do with money, or them thinking I wanted to try to get something for nothing. And assumptions cause a lot of distress and suffering, and can break up relationships, whether they be friendships, whether they be marriage relationships, boyfriend girl relationship. It don't really matter. And we go on, and we stay in relationships because we think we have to be there while we're suffering. That's a no. I got to this point, and thank God that through it all, you can still smile, but at times there's not. So we have to continue to ask each other questions, because if you're growing, you're changing. And when you're changing, things shift. If you're growing together, it's even better because you are having the communication. And it's just like somebody thought that I shouldn't, why I have a career field that I enjoy, that I'm very good at. You may not like that career field, but why should I not be in it because you don't like it? If that's the case, and then he gets into some other books, if you're in a relationship or something like that, and if you're with somebody, you can't change anybody. If you're trying to change them, means you didn't like them in the first place, so why'd you even get with them? That's another death to have you realize. So these are some questions that you may want to ask yourself. And to be in a relationship for anything over a year or two, and things aren't as you want them, or that person and that, nobody, a man or a woman, think they can change a man to be. You can't do that. People have to choose to want to change and be that. You need to get in relationships with people that you like the way they are already. And you can't make assumptions about what they will do because you think you have that power, because you don't. So you need to look at that and ask yourself some of these questions. Where do I make assumptions? Have I made assumptions? Do I need to ask more questions? Do I need to be in this relationship, and did I get in here for the wrong reasons based on my assumptions that aren't truth? It causes a lot of pain, causes a lot of pain within. Even your body even receives it. It's not good for you on any level. So it's just very interesting how the human mind works. And we have to be aware of how our mind works in these instances. Even in the world, even work. That's another huge one that stresses people out.
Yeah.
Work relationships.
Well,
I experienced one yesterday, so yeah.
Kind of what I was talking about. Work is full of some behaviors, just out of trying to ensure high productivity rates. So I'm trying to find a way to articulate it. But I think in the work environment, and it depends on your work environment. Like I've been in work environments where they don't want to have open dialogue, open communication. It's like, I don't have time for this. Like, don't have time for it. So sometimes you are forced to make an assumption about like what they may want you to do, like how they may want you to go about, like whether it's following up with the client or something like that. So sometimes you do have to kind of make a decision based on your assumptions about like maybe with the client, or like maybe who your coworker or your boss may want you to like respond as well. But I think the bigger issue with that is it leans back into you having like asking yourself, is this environment healthy for me to be in as well? Because if you're in an environment that you feel like you can never get it right, like you're always being picked apart, but then you're being forced to make assumptions and fill in the gaps, and they're not providing you with the input that you need in order to make the appropriate choice or decision. And I think there's a lot of assumptions that are made constantly in the work environment. And I think if you're not in an environment that has that open communication, encourages it, so you can get to that level of understanding, because at the end of the day, if you're serving a client or your customer, like you want to ensure that they're getting what they expect of you. It's like you want to be in an environment that sets you up for success. And if you're constantly in an environment that doesn't support that, it's not very conducive. really sit with yourself and ask yourself, why am I choosing to stay in this environment?
Well, yeah. Well, that's the question too. The whole thing that what you meant was based on asking questions. It's like, what do you expect of me? And coming from where I come and being here and growing and transforming and continue to alchemize, we have to ask the questions that we're afraid to ask. And I get that. And your voice is so important. And when you don't have a voice, you don't ask, because there's no such thing as a stupid question when you don't know what is expected of you. And so I realized that
Depends on who you work with,
if
though.
I ask the question, I think because we think that we're supposed to know it. And I'm going now, when you were talking, I'm picturing myself in an environment that I used to be in because of the work that I used to do. And then we, get inspections, and then you get inspected and you have them come up to you, and you think you're supposed to know it all. And the Crifford I was in, things are ever changing. There's, laws, and how you work with people. And I realize people are human because I'm a human. I want to be treated a certain way. And there was one guy came up to me and said, well, just so you don't know it. Well, it wasn't me to say I don't know it, and they expect, well, if you don't know it, to find the answer. So the thing of it is that you don't know. Nobody tells you that you're not to know it, and if you don't know that somebody asks you whether or not you need to, know the answer to this particular situation. And so the thing of it is we think that we're supposed to know everything, and that's not true. That causes a lot of suffering as well. So it's like, what do you want of me? And depending on the environment, you may have to go seek the answer and then find out what it is that you want. Because I'm a very literal person, and when I was told to do something, I literally did that because that's what I was told to do. It caused some confliction, but I did what I was told.
Yeah.
And because of someone who I had to sit on and on their movements. And so it was just very interesting. So when I go back and I look at that, and employee relationships, as people made a lot of assumptions. People make a lot of assumptions just because they all, like you said, staying out of people's business. If they don't see you hanging on somebody, you ain't talking about somebody. It's like, why do you care who I date and who I don't date? I can never date another person in my life, and what does it mean to you? And why? I just saw, but she is up in age, but hell, people still dating till the day they die. And I love Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda said, I'm done.
It goes back to the first agreement, be impeccable with your word.
With your word.
And how are you using your thoughts to infiltrate and get gossipy and pick apart? It goes
he
back
mentions
to
that in the book too.
Making other people's business your business is not being impeccable with your word.
That's right. That's gossip. That's gossip. That's making assumptions and everything. It's just like some people would come up and say to me, I'm like, if somebody, so they're going to go to somebody else, but you can't come to me and ask me, but you're going to ask somebody else. I'm like, no, you can come to the person now. So you're going to make assumptions. Y'all can make assumptions all day. And so it ain't going to do nothing but cause you a lot of strife and a lot of things of that nature. And so not only that, we make assumptions with ourselves. That negative, that talk in the mind that we make with ourselves, we cause ourselves a lot of inner conflict.
Ego.
Yeah.
Do I get a pause for that?
Hey. He said we overestimate and underestimate ourselves because we haven't taken the self to ask ourselves questions and answer them. And we need to stop lying to ourselves. So, this is based upon us too. We make a lot of assumptions about our love and giftedness because we base it upon what the world says, or thinks, or this, that. And that's where you have to remove yourself out of the world so you can get to the inner core of you, so you don't continue to cause inner conflict and suffering, even make assumptions about, the essence and the worthiness of who you are.
Yeah. it really is the ego. The ego plays out
Mm-hmm.
in all of these agreements in some capacity when you're
Yes.
it's a really good tool to check your ego for sure.
Yes.
But as it relates to don't make your
To know what
assumptions,
your ego is. Yeah.
the ego is showing up as a protective mechanism, essentially, to protect your ego, and then also too to avoid. Sometimes we make assumptions to avoid feeling rejected or
Yes. Yes.
embarrassed or wrong. Because I was kind of
Yes.
thinking about how you said like there's no such thing as a stupid question, and I think I've been in environments where they say like that is a stupid question, and like where I've literally someone is trying to get clarity on something in a business setting and being told, well, that's a stupid question. Why don't you know the answer
Arrogant.
to it? And it's like they're literally trying to get to that point of where your understanding is because they're not there.
That right there.
And I think as someone who's been in environments that haven't been very conducive or supportive and me feeling like I could get on the same page with them or
Been
that I
there
was
with
doing
you.
work that was like really it just wasn't soul centered.
Yes. Yes.
Which is
Yes.
why I wasn't meant to stay longer. I got what I needed from it, and it has provided,
Mm-hmm.
again, a sense of serving for sure. But no matter whether it's in work, it's in your marriage, your friendships, your partnerships, yourself, I think the common denominator is how are you in conversation? Like you have to be in constant open conversation. And this is something that within my own relationship, I have to be in constant conversation with this bro, with this dude, with this man.
Yeah.
Because if I don't and he doesn't with me, we are constantly making assumptions. So what we both have realized because we've been together so long is like, you know what? Hey, you said this. What did you mean by it? And then I tell you. And then for me, I've learned I've added another layer. Be like, okay, what did you hear me say to ensure that they
that sounds like somebody we know
understand what I'm saying? I learned that tool from a marriage counselor. Like that just stuck to me. It's like
I have to remember
you're
that
having
again.
conversations with your partner and they ask you, your input. You want to make sure that they understood and heard you. So ask them, what did you hear me say? So you have to be in that constant state of open communication because again, like you were saying, people evolve. A lot of times we can change how we thought we knew things. And because of that, it shifts and changes how we see the world and how we see that. So that's why it's so important to always be in open dialogue and open conversation. And I think it goes back to what you were saying about like text messaging. I really feel very strongly about texting, as you can tell. I feel like we attempt to have conversations with people in a way that will never allow for clear understanding.
Yes.
Text messages are not that. Sometimes you need to have, and I think this is probably a me thing. I don't want to have a long, drawn out conversation by texting. I'm like, I don't have time for this. But I know it's probably a generational thing. I know a lot of people do like to do that, but I feel like there is a bit of a disconnect sometimes. So you want to be sure that when you are communicating, again, that everyone that's part of the conversation is on the same page. So you want to ensure that you're on the same page is kind of my point I'm making. So to wrap it up, because we're getting towards the end of this, what are some ways to hold ourselves accountable in how to not make assumptions? Like what would you say are some tools?
I think that I feel that it should be easy for you to know because I think it comes up real quick. when you don't know something and when you need to ask, so you don't make the assumptions about something. And I believe that even in the book, and he speaks of a vertical experience, we don't feel like we should ask questions, one, or are not able to articulate what we need to ask to get clarity. But that's the only way to do it. If they can't understand, then sometimes we have to be articulate enough to be able to reword something. It's just like being a teacher, and some of the things of my own experience is being able to understand that my point of view, we might could be saying the same thing and even have it differently. Or I can take, because the same paragraph I read, you might not get the same message from it that I get. So you want to go ahead and be able to ask the question, to be able, like when it comes up, it's just like if there's something like me and you, and it's like, well, I think she might, but I don't know. So I can't assume this. So I like to surprise people. So I find ways to try to get stuff out of you, but I'm still asking you a question so I can have clarity. It's just like if you're in a relationship and you know, depending on how long you've been in a relationship, if you bought all the diamonds, then you need to kind of find out what else this person may like. Yeah, well, that's an April thing. Well, actually, it's a me thing. So it's it's that part. To find out what else might be of interest. So you don't want to make the assumptions. And like people think you can read their minds. Don't try to do it. It is too much. It's stressing, and we don't deserve to be at that point.
And it's dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Dangerous in that you it leans into struggling and suffering.
Yep, and we're trying to alleviate suffering because we're here to enjoy and live life. Yeah. Like I said, live life and stop letting life live you. And that means stop making assumptions.
Yeah. I also want to acknowledge the challenge of this, because
this is a challenge
in a world that really does facilitate miscommunication.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
And I think that's why it's so important to have that awareness around, like, okay, what's going on, so you can anticipate how to go about being in that space. Like I always like to know, like I always think of my grandmother. She always says, like, I like to know where people stand. Like if you don't like me because of this, or you think of the world from this, like tell me, let me know so I know where you stand. But also too, I think it can be helpful, but it goes back to being open-minded as well, and allowing people to shift how they see things as well. And so I think there's a couple of things that kind of pop up with like how to overcome the challenge of the innateness of miscommunication, and the way that I feel like dysfunctionally communicate with people.
Yeah,
I think we're very in a state of dysfunction in how we communicate with people, is pausing. I don't think people pause and allow for space. I will say that I am very practiced in that as a coach. It's like any good coach will tell you, like, the power of silence, pausing in silence. You know, it can seem awkward, right? And you know this as a coach, like holding, like, just like, here, we just sit here quietly.
It's a struggle to do that.
To fill up the space. But as a coach, you recognize that when you hold that space and you just pause, you see this shift happen where the dots start to kind of connect. But
yeah, that's a difficult thing to do.
But we gotta, like,
we have to practice.
It's a practice for sure. So pausing before, like, if you like see something and you recognize, like, and I think also to pause and lean in curiously. That's what I would say. Pause and lean in curiously. So I'll take it back to like the example of like say you see someone walk in and you're like, ooh, I want to see if I can get to know them. Like I want to take them on a date or what have you. Like, so I'm going to pause and I'm going to lean in curiously.
Yes.
Pausing, leaning in curiously is simply asking the person like, hey, are you open to, are you interested in getting to know me?
Mm-hmm.
And just letting them fill in the gap for you. And like they say no, like, okay, you got your answer. Versus sitting there creating a whole storyline, like, and either like on both sides of the fence. I've seen some people that don't approach someone because they've made all these assumptions and they never ask the question. And I know one person had like, I remember someone kind of saying like, oh, it's so interested in so-and-so, your friend so-and-so. And I was like, well, why didn't you tell them? Like, they're not in a relationship with anyone. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, you would have known had you asked. But since we're in conversation, now you know. So really pausing and leaning in curiously, it creates like that you getting comfortable with like trying to get to that sense of clarity, kind of letting go of like filling in the gaps with assumptions, which is what we do. And really, when we embrace curiosity, we kind of let go of the need for a particular outcome based on our assumption as well.
Taking it personally when they say
Yes.
no.
And then the last part, I think this is the most important part. Hear me when I say this, people. We need to practice compassion. Compassion. From the understanding that everyone views the world in their own unique lens. And be compassionate in the assumptions that you make about other people.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I think if we start to make much more compassionate assumptions, maybe that's a great way to start. Like I'm gonna make a compassionate assumption that like, oh, you're acting like an asshole, but maybe you're doing your best because something's going on at home. Right. So I'm going to even take it to that level because I am fully aware of my humanness and our need to kind of make assumptions and what have you for what, you know, just to kind of like process through information.
It's because of fear. I mean, fear to go forth and ask that. And like I said, everybody is not your person. I mean, you know, because you may like somebody and you might not be their type. And if they say no, it goes back to the word, don't take it personally, so you can, you know, go off to some other level in your mind, you know, that, you know, won't necessarily serve you. You know, that's why I need to get with a lot of men, because they figure if they like somebody, then you ought to like them. But that's not the truth, because she might not be somebody you want to be in a relationship with.
And this also applies to friendships too. Let's talk a little bit about friendships. This episode we may go over a few minutes over because I feel like we need to talk about not
friendships
just
too. I agree.
Intimate friendships.
That's what we were talking about.
Oh my gosh. I have several examples of people making assumptions about me because they just like one assumption that I feel like, and I really am going to use the word friend loosely in this scenario, because I think if you're really a friend, you extend them the opportunity of like filling in the gaps for you, like saying like, hey girl, are you okay? Like that question, right? That's what a friend does. That's like, hey, like what's going on? Like I haven't heard from you. Are you all right? Do you need anything? A lot of people who are associates, I would say, they make a lot of assumptions about me that, oh, I'm good. I got my life together. I'm never in dysfunction. I'm highly practiced. I'm highly favored and all those things. And it's like, well, those things can be true, but I'm also a human who has feelings and emotions and is in the same world that you are in. And no man is an island. I kind of think of that. So we just be careful of the assumptions that you make about people that you say you care about. Check on them. Ask them, how are you doing? Like if you really call someone a friend, if you cannot tell someone in any given time how someone's doing, like, you know, genuinely how they're doing, regardless of you sharing that their business with them, you think you need to do a check on yourself. You need to check yourself in terms of, like, how are you being a good friend? I have to check myself too all the time. Like, I'm like, how am I being a good friend, and checking on my friends as well? And a lot of times we make the assumptions like, well, they haven't called me, so they must be good. Like, the last
Right,
thing some
right.
people want to do when they're in a bit of like trying to figure things out, the last thing I'm gonna do is gonna be like, girl, I'm struggling. That's just me. Some people will do that as well. And I think it's really
That's not
important
me.
what you said is to getting to a place of understanding how other people work, but also holding the space for them to, like, to shift and change within how you thought your understanding of them
Mm-hmm.
was, because people do
Mm-hmm.
change given what's going on in life. So
Yeah, because I reached out to a lot of people, and they reached out to me because they think, make the assumption I got it going. I mean, not got it going on, but you know that everything's kosher. It's just like having a house. Or I could, and then you say because you compare yourself to that. I said you don't. Nobody knows what you went through to get what you have or gotten to where you've gotten to. And it's not that I don't go through anything, but your assumption and not calling me things just like what I went through this year, you're aware of it. I mean, the little bit of COVID got out of my system, but I had wore myself down pushing something that wasn't designed for me through God's grace. And so I realized that I just need to go with the flow, then having what nobody knows that I'll be talking about, which is the alopecia that was caused by that one little week or 8 little days. And like I said, I got that stuff out of my system in a week because I don't do diagnosis. I can't sit in that shit. So I understand that nobody would think that everything was going all fine with me because I'm not out there, woe is me, and I'm not out in the public then saying I'm sick doesn't mean that I'm not going through something as I grow forward. You know, this ego behind me. I mean, it's a great we it goes through a process to continue to rise higher and higher and higher. So yeah, just don't make assumptions. Check on your people that, like she said, and don't assume it. You got multimillionaire people that are sick as a dog. They got money, but they still sick. So I mean, you don't know. That doesn't define the nature of a human being. You know, your best people. I can tell somebody's gone. I'm like, hey, what's going on with you? And most of the time, if we haven't talked for a while, when we do get together, we know something, or we have a little text here, and I know I have a, a really best dude who's a real busy guy, touching the world with creating businesses and hiring and doing stuff, and he was just born to do what he does. But even if we don't talk for a while, when we do, it's like we probably talked yesterday. But I still know what's going on between him and Twin T, his wife. So it's just like really, really cool. So yeah, remember that.
yeah.
You
Any
got those points.
key takeaways? Anything you want to, like, leave?
No, I think everything's there. I just think I want everybody just to be aware, to be more aware of their actions, their behavior, and where they come in assumptions, where they take things personally, and be impeccable with your word. And most importantly, be impeccable with your word to yourself. And also in this here, don't even take yourself too personally, because we seem to do that as well too. And in this essence, even with yourself, don't make assumptions. Honor, and we have to do it. The women, depending on what men, continue to honor the worth that you are, the worthiness that you are, and it all comes from within. All we have to do is continue to let go of these beliefs that don't serve us, these agreements that we made. And if you get into the book, um, and after we do the last agreement with you, there's some other things that can carry you through in this world with these 4 agreements and beyond. And I'm sure we'll be talking about more stuff.
So get the book. Get the book. Again, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
There you go for the people that come in late.
So when in doubt, ask, and replace assumptions with questions
Yes,
to seek the
that.
truth. So if you've made it this far, let us know. Yeah, thank you. Let us know how you enjoyed the episode. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up as well. So we're going to end it here. Thanks for being in conversation with us, and we hope to see you in the next video.
Yes, much love. Peace.